Hello and welcome to the No Bullshit Property Podcast, brought to you by Cert Property.
I'm Howard.
And I'm Paul, and today we're welcoming back Ben Hall from LOFT to discuss why health and well-being is so important when designing spaces for residents. I know you'll have a lot to discuss about that, Ben. LOFT are actually our podcast sponsors. They work with build-to-rent developers and operators like ourselves, as well as landlords and residents to complete residential interior projects with furnishings created to enhance the residential living experience. And here we are on our LOFT furniture.
Yeah, very kindly donated.
Very comfortable.
Very comfortable.
Very comfortable.
It is, yeah.
So before we get started with this episode, just a quick reminder to check out our previous episodes to give you an insight into our approach to transformative property management and the ever-growing build-to-rent sector and how we're building the sustainable communities of the future.
So, yeah, I mean, obviously, you've been on before. I think it's our first repeat guest,
You
isn't
are.
it? Yeah, so welcome back. Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Do you want to just give a quick recap on who you are, LOFT, what LOFT does, and yeah, we'll start talking a bit more about today's topic after that.
So I'm the owner and founder of LOFT, which is a residential furnishing specialist in the build-to-rent sector, student living sector, PRS sector, HMO, co-living. We're a one-stop solution for property developers and property investors. I've known you guys now for probably 15 years, and we've been working together on various different resi stuff. We've been involved in Manchester's complete transformation, which is what I think we spoke a lot about last time. And we're kind of at the forefront of this transformation in the build-to-rent sector, really, to try and treat residents as customers and try and provide as much as they possibly can within a residential development to make it as appealing as possible for rent. I suppose in reaction to what you've just mentioned in terms of how heavily amenitized those spaces are, I think if you speak to residents, I think what they find the most important thing is affordability. And I think that there's two different things. You have the developer's vision for how the scheme looks, or even the architect's vision for how the scheme looks, which can often be, almost over amenitized. And then you can have what the residents are actually looking for, and what the majority of residents are actually looking for is something that is affordable. So as long as the amenity spaces are enabling the developer or the operator to be able to mark the rents at something that is affordable for single occupancy or sharers, then we're all for it. But quite often, once the amenity spaces are built within a beautiful hotel-esque residential development, quite often these spaces are underutilized in comparison to how much the apartments are utilized, because quite often the residents don't necessarily feel comfortable within those spaces. And I think that's probably the most important thing and advice that LOFT can start to offer if we can get in early enough at planning stage. If we can get early enough with the developer on their brand values and what it is they're actually trying to deliver to the market, LOFT can definitely advise on interior design and furnishings that will help to either, facilitate community or create a space that actually gets used, rather than it just looking really fancy for the photographs to try and get people in. There's lots of data out there at the moment that actually suggests that over-amenitized residential development is not used in a price per square foot return on investment for the resident. But then when it comes to selling that development, maybe that's what makes it more attractive. I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's a trend that we're seeing whereby quite a lot of the big investors, I think, now have been through this first wave of build-to-rent investment, which a lot of it has been focused on, maximising the amenities, delivering the highest quality amenities, and that naturally results in, therefore, the highest rents you're going to get. But there's also a limited market for that sort of product. Like you say, some people are driven more by affordability than necessarily by having the best gym with the best equipment in it in their blocks. So it's interesting to see a lot of the investors now talking about this as well, which I think has come out of the experience of the first wave of build to rent that's been delivered. So Yeah, it's about striking that balance, isn't it?
Well, everything's changed since we last met with regards to the cost of capital and the cost of building and the labour shortage and the cost of land. So like being able to make these developments stack up now is becoming more challenging for developers, which is meaning actually smaller living spaces with better amenities, but amenities that are well planned and that are more functional. I think first-hand experiences, you need to be able to work, rest and play within one space all at the same time. So you need to be able to feel confident enough to go and sit downstairs and work in the co-living room while somebody else might be doing something at their leisure and somebody else might be studying or whatever that might be. Somebody else might be relaxing and just wanting to sit down outside of their apartment. And I think that the more functionality and the more flexibility that you can give to a space, the more often that it gets used. I mean, if you go all the way back to sort of 2007, 2008, when the big PBSA sort of tsunami came onto the market during the financial crisis, investors were looking for the safest place for their money. And this is when we first started to see spaces with really glamorous amenities. The private rented sector never had it. And build to rent sort of took inspiration from PBSA, I think. But cinema rooms get quite mouldy quite quickly. And aren't necessarily used by all of the residents. What you'll find is when, there's quite, as I say, there's lots of data out there at the moment about, certain residents who are living there will use the cinema room, but the majority of residents won't. If there's a room that can be used as a co-working space, as a yoga studio, if you could do cookery classes within that room as well, if you can put table tennis table in there or maybe a pool table in there, that multifunctional, as many different uses for that space as humanly possible, that's when you find those spaces giving you that return per square foot back, and how you can explain it to the residents that this is why the rent is more or less. Because on the retrofit side of things, which is what we're heavily involved in right now, full developments that have been stabilised are now changing hands because it makes more sense to buy those than build new. It's a more cost-effective option, and there's lots you can do within the development to sort of up the yield. We're seeing amenity spaces being taken out and apartments being put in. And then apartments that have been poorly designed, 2-bedroom apartments that are like 900 square foot plus, we're having extra bedrooms put in. And that's becoming a walk-in wardrobe or a work from home room. There's a lot of retrofit activity that actually suggests that over-amenitizing a building is actually putting off the majority of the market.
Mm. Well, there's only so many people, as I say, that can afford that top level, highly amenitized build-to-rent space. So already a lot of the product that's out there is all chasing that same fairly slim area of the market. Just from a cost point of view, that's alienating a big chunk of the market who would probably want to live within those locations but can't afford to live in the highly amenitized building. But also it's perhaps putting off other people who go, well, I'd rather have a bigger apartment and smaller amenity space and feel comfortable in my own apartment. Yes, I still want somewhere to go to occasionally if there's an event on, or yoga, or just to get out the apartment to work. And like you say, that's the importance of having these multifunctional spaces. But it's interesting to hear that you're experiencing retrofit and repurposing of some of these amenity spaces. That people have gone through this experience now and realised, well, not everyone needs the kind of identikit to build to rent of cinema room, gym, co-working space, residence lounge, etc., etc. It is a bit more nuanced than that.
I think we touched on it, before the podcast. It's you've got people over the age of 40 designing spaces for people in their 20s, and I feel like the research that you guys are doing and some of the other more sort of intuitive developers who actually really want to find out what the residents want, I think there needs to be a more proactive approach to engaging with young people, certainly starting with PBSA through to co-living, build to rent and single family housing. What is it that you actually want from these spaces? And we've been involved with some market research there's a company called the Property Marketing Strategists. They did a big piece of work on PBSA, and it all comes back to affordability. You know, I'd rather, you know, pay $19.99 to go to Pure Gym and save 150 quid a month on my apartment, if that was an option. Not to say that amenity spaces aren't important, and I think that in PBSA particularly, and co-living, you know, social facilitation and social interaction and building a residential community is very important, and interior design can definitely help to facilitate that. The class conference, which is actually happening in Manchester this week, they sponsored a piece of research about the mental health issues that young people are facing today, possibly as a result of COVID, but probably more likely a result of digitalization and the impact of social media and just having access to too much information. You know, you've got a building of 630 20 square meter rooms, but you know, 70% of the people that are living in the building feel isolated and alone. And I feel as developers and as interior designers and service providers, it's our responsibility really to look for ways to design buildings that do help to encourage a feeling of security and a feeling of safety, but also enable people to feel more confident to go into a social space, not having to wear their best clothes or do their makeup. You know, a lot of these amenity spaces that we've been involved in even, you know, or not necessarily designed, but provided the FF&E for, just look like bad airport lounges that you just wouldn't go in. Like you wouldn't fit, you know, like an airport lounge where it's all a little bit sort of corporate and a little bit cold and functional, and it just feels awkward. Everybody's sort of like waiting to leave, and that's the sort of environment that's been created because we haven't engaged with the end user well enough, which is why I found your research and what people actually wanted from these spaces really, really interesting. And really super valuable.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. You said it before that a lot of the build to rent out there have been designed by people who aren't living it. And I think a lot of the first wave of build to rent that came forward was designed around the experience of a lot of the investment funds and people sort of setting the decisions on those, their experiences of going to America and looking at what build to rent is out in the US, which is, a lot of it is quite heavily amenitized in, you know, the city centre urban locations. But there is swathes of American build to rent that also isn't heavily amenitized. But I think that's then influenced a lot of decision making to go, well, it's working over there, so let's do it here, rather than necessarily going out and doing the research.
And a lot of the money's American.
And and of course that as well,
But we're not American, and we don't have anywhere near as much space as America, you know, geologically. Or
and we're not as car dependent as well. You know, it makes a lot more sense to put a lot of amenities within a development when.
What happened to the northern quarter?
And now let's take a quick break to introduce you to the LOFT showroom. At their offices in both Manchester and London, LOFT have showrooms where you can explore carefully curated spaces featuring the latest key pieces from their product ranges and multiple room sets designed to inspire. Working closely with BTR developers, operators, landlords and residents to create residential interiors that are more than just functional, they're thoughtfully designed to enhance the way people live. From a single furniture package for a studio apartment to furnishing large-scale projects of up to 500 units, LOFT offers a full range of services to meet any need. LOFT's in-house team provide end-to-end solutions, including interior design, property staging, refurbishment, delivery and installation, removals and recycling, and even virtual staging. LOFT's comprehensive approach and strong track record ensures that every project is seamlessly managed, delivering both style and functionality tailored to each client. Visit LOFT's Manchester or London showrooms to see how they can transform your space, or go to loft.co.uk to discover more about the sectors and customers they work with.
It's a one-way street.
I mean, I often think build to rent is very focused around workspace and not as focused around like leisure. And at the end of the day, it is where people live. You know, so there's always seems to be a lot of workspace in there. But actually, the things that tell us from what people want from the survey is more social space, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, that was the bit I was going to mention is, you know, we've taken a slightly different approach and gone out, as you say, Ben, and surveyed tenants who live with us, people who've inquired with us, past tenants, to actually understand, well, are these buildings providing you
What
with
was
what
the
you want?
demographic of the research? How many people did you interview, and how many boys, how many girls, what age?
I can't remember the exact figures off the top of my head in terms of quantity, but it was the whole of our tenant database plus previously inquired. We also then, as well as getting the survey feedback through just an online survey, then arranged focus groups as well with select members to get further, more nuanced feedback, as well as just the survey responses. So we've tested it with quite a wide data set of the target demographic, because they're already living in buildings in the city or on the fringe of the city. So yeah, it's more about listening to what they're telling you they want, and what do you want this building to do, and not just about the amenity spaces, but like I said before, would you rather have a larger apartment and a smaller amenity space? Would you rather have a home working station in your apartment than a co-working space within the building? And of course, you can't satisfy everyone, but I think a lot of the schemes delivered so far as build to rent have all kind of tried to satisfy the same need, rather than being more nuanced, and also understanding that, points were you making, not everyone's an extrovert and wants to go and use those communal spaces to socialise in.
Some developers have been smart with it though.
Yes,
and like you say, a workspace can also be a play space.
Yeah.
And can also be a rest space.
Yeah.
So if you have the right ops team within the building, and the furniture is multifunctional, just simple things, chairs that stack, chairs that you could, with facility to be able to wheel them into an area where they're not in the middle of the room, a table that folds and can be pushed to the corner where the room can be used for something else. We all do different things at different times. So in the morning it can be a yoga studio, during the middle of the day it can be a co-working space, then it can reopen for some sort of lunchtime activity, then it can go back to working, and then it can be a social space in the evening. It's like, when we first started doing student, like you'd see the interior designers like with neon lights that said like work and play, and like orange letters, like italics. And I was always really cringing about that sort of like, we're telling you that this area is for this, but at 18, when someone says go right, you want to go left. So giving the resident more options for how to use the space, supported by the on-site team, if there is one, is definitely becoming more successful. And I think, look, ultimately retention is the key. And if you have a space where people feel comfortable about using with their friends, where it's not dominated by one group of friends within the building or one type of person, and that's managed well by the concierge and by the ops team, that's part of what community management is. And the word community got thrown out a lot at the beginning 10 years ago because it was a big word in America, and it still is. Every development's called a community, and it is a community, but it's only a community if that community is facilitated by the design and by the people that are operating the building. And that doesn't just mean saying hello Paul, hello Howard in the morning. That's not what that means. Pastoral care, particularly in PBSA, is massively important now, and they're not actually concierge teams anymore. They are pastoral care, personal, emotional support functions, and those buildings and facilities need to reflect the needs of the young people today, which is support, because the messaging that they're receiving on a daily basis, the adverts, the news, the pressure of being successful, their studies, their course, their family, it's becoming too much for people to cope with right now. It really is. And we want to be a company that is there to not necessarily, help people to be able to cope with the newfound pressures of life. And that's why I started that live off grid business, because we need a balance from the digital and the nature, but then you also need that within a building. So you need an element of biophilic design. You need to bring nature into the building. You need to be able to calm people down, because you go outside, you can't park anywhere. It's too hectic. There's too much noise. Making a sanctuary within a building is probably what my team and the guys at Loft would suggest is the most important thing to bring into a new build to rent or PBSA scheme.
Yeah, and you said before, like quite a few of the earlier generation ones often had quite a corporate clinical feel. So what are you doing now differently, or what are you seeing as the trends emerging in sort of the refinement of these spaces to make it feel softer and more welcome?
I think lighting is probably the number one thing that you need to consider first before you consider the fixtures and fittings, because natural light is something that we're all drawn to naturally. But you also need a dark, quiet space, but that can be in your bedroom or in a relaxation room or a prayer room or whatever they put in the building. But we're finding now that when we're speaking to developers about biophilia and the importance of having a sense of nature within the building in such a urban jungle like Manchester or London, is just natural materials, natural stone, fabrics that feel soft and relaxing but are made from sort of recycled materials. You know, we're having big conversations about the importance of mattresses, and we've designed a mattress now that you can flip so it's cool in the summer and warm in the winter, particularly important in the UK. Literally, our head office has just been turned into what we're calling a house of innovation, where a partner of ours, Martina from A Designer at Heart, has made something called Nest Block for the bedrooms, which is essentially a raised bed that's fitted, but it has a number of blocks that build up to the bed that can be removed and used for different things, whether it's a side table, whether it's storage, whether it's a seat for somebody to come when they come and visit you. We're multifunctional design, natural fixture finishes and materials, a feeling of stone, for instance, or wood, a wood grain top, for instance, and then just adding a sense of sort of greenery as well with plants and the colours as well. I think people underestimate the importance of like silence, and people underestimate the importance of darkness too for sleep. So the research that I was speaking about earlier, the student research that was done, when you're sleeping in such a high density building, you know, getting a good night's sleep can be quite challenging. So we've brought to the market a 50% recycled material that absorbs 45% of all sound, but it's only about 6 mil thick. And that's something that's been really popular in the student space, and that can be made to look almost like moss or almost like grass. So when it's in your room, it gives you that sense of green that sort of like calms you, but it also absorbs any sound. If some people are noisy, some people aren't. We've done a lot of research on mattresses and trying to help people to get a good night's sleep. Done a lot of research on blackout blinds that actually enable you to sleep without light just beaming through. And if you've had a late night, or you're struggling to sleep or struggling to settle in a new environment, sleep is so important. I think, you know, it's like 50% of mental health issues are created by inability to be able to sleep, or whether that's noise or your own mind or whatever. And then we've done a lot of work on sort of task chairs and study chairs for PBSA, and also from working from home, where, you know, ergonomically designed chairs which enable people not to, if they're sitting down for long periods of time, you know, they're designed to support your back. So, and it just giving people encouragement of just understanding that looking after yourself and being health conscious is not a weakness. It's a strength, and that's all of our furniture and all of our interior design is purchased and procured in order to try and improve the residential experience. But what that means is try and find products that enable well-being.
Yeah. I think an underappreciated element of creating these environments is actually air quality as well. I mean, you know, latest building regulations are focused a lot more on it, but obviously older buildings, sometimes very poor circulation, very poor air quality.
Heating as well.
Heating as well, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been looking into like wall finishes and materials that can help improve air quality and innovative things like that for a retrofit. But all of these add up to the whole, don't they? They've all got to be considered, like you say.
There's some good tech out there now to test air quality within bedrooms. I think the business is called Butterfly or something like that, and it's quite a pretty butterfly shape that will test the carbon monoxide, it will test the pollution. The difference between, I live in London now, but coming back to Manchester, the difference here, the air quality here is so much cleaner than you get even in London. But this, obviously, construction is the biggest pollutant of all. So if you're living next to a construction site, you're breathing in all of that dust all of the time, and that can make you feel really tired. And all of these things need to be considered, and it's our responsibility really as suppliers to the resi industry.
Yeah, and us as designers of the buildings that people are living in. So what do you see, because obviously you're in a position where you're dealing with a lot of people in the industry, build to rent, PBSA, as you say. What do you see as further emerging trends into 2025 and maybe beyond?
So on the development side, on sort of like architecturally, we're seeing a lot of retrofit happening, because obviously cost of capital's gone up, land's expensive, build cost, shortage of labour. You'll know that better than anyone. So the retrofit piece and redesigning office to resi stuff, but also, having a look at buildings and saying, what can we do differently in existing buildings, adding extra bedrooms, changing the way the amenity spaces are positioned, changing layouts within the building, the approach to the building is definitely a big trend. Also, a lot of stock that's coming to maturity now that was the original build to rent stock needs to be looked at and retrofitted. You can wrap cupboard doors and make them look different. You can wrap internal doors and make them look completely different. We're involved with some big players at the moment that are just looking to upgrade the furniture, the lighting, the way it feels, and it's amazing what you can do with a lick of paint and new light fittings and some dehumidifiers and a bit of new furniture. You can make a place look completely different. And the same's happening in the PRS space, as well as a lot of that stock has been very tired for a very long time. A lot of landlords are exiting the market now. Individual landlords exiting is an opportunity for the institutional investors to come in, and the institutional investors have got a longer term plan for what they're going to do with that PRS stock. In terms of trends from a furniture perspective, it very much is in the direction of biophilic design and trying to bring nature into buildings, but also looking at a space and thinking, how many different uses can we create within this room or this space, rather than this is for co-living, this is for the cinema, this is for the gym. There's you don't need to add as much space if you use the space wisely.
So less is more.
I think so, or just giving the residents more options for how they can use it, so it does get used, rather than it sitting with 2 or 3 people in it when there's a building of 350 apartments. 700-800 people live in there.
I think you hit the nail on the head really before in saying it's not just about building the space and creating all this amenity space, it's how it's managed and operated, and doing that in the right way. And you need an operator who knows how to work that building and maximise the return from it by doing that. It's not just a case of building it, it's the aftercare and the operation going forward.
And listening to what the residents want from that space as well. I think that's the key to it, is not just when you're looking to design it and build it, it's that continual engagement. Again, going back to kind of the identikit of build to rent, first generation, a lot of it has always been like, oh yeah, we must have a space for a yoga studio. Well, you might have built that yoga studio, but if no one's using it, what's the point keeping it in that use? Evolve it and listen to what people actually want from it.
And I think there is a lot of buildings out there where the gyms are gathering dust and just creating cost.
Yeah, big maintenance costs, and people don't feel comfortable to go in there. It's about how do you familiarization. This is the thing. That's why a co-working space within a resi development is a good idea, with some F&B there, is because we might live in the same building, but we probably wouldn't interact with one another until we've seen one another 6, 7, 8 or 9, 10 times before you actually start acknowledging one another. We're quite private as British people, and digitalization has made us even more private and less willing to approach people on a direct energy level. And I think we're really keen as a business to be able to look at how people are walking into the building, where the lifts are situated, where the concierge desk is situated, how that makes people feel, whether they feel overlooked, whether they feel exposed going in the lift, where the private spaces are. If you watch how spaces get used, any public spaces, people are either in the natural light or by the power bank. So that's a necessity though. That's bad design. So, you know, you've got to make power banks and natural light and the ability to be able to work, rest and play within one space a reality. And that's when you'll start to get the ROI from the social and amenity spaces.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've seen hundreds of build to rent developments and hundreds of PBSA developments, and the operators are always scratching their head like, what can we do more to try and, you know, and a lot of the operators are very, very good at interacting with the residents and bringing the residents together and organising events and stuff like that. You know, they are very conscious of it. But it doesn't necessarily mean the building at planning or the building at architectural stage is actually designed with that long-term view. Mm-hmm. It's hard because we usually get in once the architect and the planning has been submitted, and then, okay, here's the space, what would you do with this?
Yeah.
I think it's very easy to presume as well that everybody wants the same thing. You know, and the token event is a barbecue on the roof or
pizza night.
And they're all the same, aren't they? And I was just thinking actually then, as you were talking about, you know, gyms and how just in the city centres, Manchester, London, Liverpool, like these class gyms have just, nobody goes to the gym anymore, do they? They go to classes, they go to ice baths and saunas and everything like that. They go to a different thing for everything because they want to be part of that. But the go-to is to put a gym in with a leg press and some dumbbells, which actually, maybe people of an older age are still doing that, but young people aren't going to the gym like that anymore at all.
Yeah.
News to me. I was blissfully unaware that they weren't.
No, they're not. Everyone's going to the new sauna and ice bath.
The new ice bath, right? Got it.
If you pay a little bit extra to get a nicer facility, and if there's more people there from outside your building, if you are looking to meet people, then I do think gyms get used. I think there's a big difference between London and Manchester, what people are expecting. And Manchester's quite easy to negotiate. Such a great city, you can walk everywhere. You don't necessarily need a gym in your building because you probably want to get out of your building and go to the gym and make an activity of that. Manchester being such a young city, you know, your research says it, you know, they want spaces to be able to have a party with their friends that isn't in their apartment, that they're able to let loose a little bit within the building. That's probably not as available as what you might think, because, you know, the operator or the concierge probably wouldn't feel comfortable with letting 30, 40 people let loose in a room, you know, for obvious reasons. But that's probably what these rooms need to be designed for, to be able to facilitate.
And would you actually pay more rent to have that facility? I think I probably would, rather than have people around at mine.
But then, you know, then they're at risk, you know, of losing their deposit if anything gets damaged within the apartment by accident or whatever. But I think anything that we can do to encourage in-person social interaction and a sense of feeling of security and calm in the face of a world that is becoming more hectic and more digital and quicker is what we're trying to do. And I think that most of the conscientious developers are trying to do the same too.
I still think there is a place to have tech to make things easier, isn't there? Definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
That's an enabler. There's got to be an enabler.
There's an app out there called Hazar at the moment. I don't know if you've seen it. The girl Harriet has developed an app which is helping student operators at checkout, because there's often quite a lot of personal possessions left behind, particularly from international students, and it's like a swap shop. But also there's a community aspect to it as well, because let's say, for instance, I've got a couple of pairs of Nike Air Jordans, I'm a sneaker guy, and I put those on the swap shop, and then somebody within my building also has a pair of Jordans that he might want to swap. Immediately I've got something in common with that person, and then you can go and meet that person to do that exchange. And that can be music, CD. I mean, people don't listen to CDs anymore, do they? But a book, perhaps, or
they're coming back.
Or a jacket. Or
they're not using gyms either.
They're not using gyms, and vinyls are back.
Trying to find ways that aren't contrived to enable people to communicate and find common ground where it doesn't feel like that has been forced is what I feel like I'm interested in trying to support, you know. Yeah.
No, that's it. I think the point we've been making is communities, they're evolving what a community is, and we've got to adapt what the offering is to provide for what that community currently wants. And we can't do that just by trying to second guess it. It's by listening to what they want, and not just from design, but through the ongoing day-to-day management of that space and how someone feels living in it, working in it, playing in it. So.
And feedback from the residents while they're in the building. Yeah, you're quite right. I think just flexibility and functionality. There's so much that you can do. You know, chairs can be used for so many different things, and you know, coffee tables and dining tables can be collapsible, and they can be pushed to one side. And there's projectors. We've designed a space recently where we've just put projectors in the ceiling, so you can have a fitness class projected on the wall, or a movie projected on the wall. But the chairs and stuff that we're providing are multifunctional for all of those purposes, or a breakout session, or whatever that might be. A lot of kids, they want education, they want to learn, they want to know more about stuff from sort of like seasoned professionals, you know, like seminars and stuff like that. You see, especially down in London, you see them bringing sort of industry professionals in to speak to the students or the residents about stuff, and they seem to be very popular.
Plenty to think about.
Absolutely, yeah. No, really interesting.
Thank you for coming in. Lots of insights, as always. I feel like there's probably a third return visit to talk about some more of the evolution of the build-to-rent in the PBSA sector. So, thank you.
So if you like this episode, please check out all our previous episodes on our website, www.property.co.uk, and subscribe to us where you get your podcasts.